The first day back at school flies by. It was weird to think that this would be my first day of high school ever. I was sick of Oswego High, but there were too many fond memories there to want to leave it all behind so soon. We got our timetables and options given to us, and the usual welcome back address by Principal Schubert in the Great Hall. Nicole could not stop yakking about how amazing her summer was, forgetting she'd already told me all about it over the weekend. I loved her to bits, but I can't deny I was only too glad to see Jack waiting for me at the steps when the final bell rang at 3.
Jack, as in Jack Winslow, was the little side factor I mentioned earlier which made my anticipation of college life in the UK a little less eager than it used to be. I suppose it was silly, really, considering we'd only been seeing each other a few weeks towards the end of summer, but it was hard to think straight with all the butterflies in my stomach. It was still early days, after all. I was allowed to feel that way. Hey, Maya. Hey, Nicole, he added. How's it feel then, seniors?
Like the end is approaching. I feigned a tone of despair, although there was a tinge of truth in there. Like I said, it was still early days, so we were still doing the whole awkward flirting and lame attempts at jokes game. Sniffing butts, as my dad liked to so crudely refer to it. Nothing like good old British humour to set the right tone for a budding romance. Nicole found that one particularly hilarious when I told her. She never lived it down. It was her that reminded me of it just now, nudging my ribs with her elbow at another equally awkward, lame, and yet maddeningly endearing joke Jack was drawing out for far too long.
Stop it, I hissed. What was that? Jack thought I was trying to cut him off. He had a look of confusion on his face, as Nicole and I burst out laughing. I'm sorry, I wasn't talking to you. Nicole!
Sorry, Jack, my fault completely. He didn't really seem to take notice. He was too psyched about the new year. He was swim team captain this year, so he had a lot of work to do getting the juniors into shape for the season. But it didn't mean he had a better chance of getting into Portland State, a fact my dad seemed, at least, a bit approving of.
Approval. That was always a good sign. You know what else is a good sign? I thought to myself. The fact that his shoulders seem to have gotten even broader, and his back muscles are definitely more defined.
This time, it was Nicole that had to shut me up, as she could practically hear the fantasies playing out in my head. You are so falling for him.
I am not, and even if I was, it's all your fault anyway.
Nicole beamed like a proud mother and nodded as such. She had spent the last few weeks of summer trying to convince me to go on a date with Jack. I wasn't too keen at first. I didn't think he was my type. I never usually went for the jocks. He was a nice jock, to be honest. In many ways, he wasn't really a jock at all. He just happened to enjoy swimming a lot, and he was very good at it. So naturally, anyone athletically inclined and remotely good-looking in high school was categorized accordingly. I have to admit, I can only say this after he proved all my expectations wrong and turned out to be quite the charming and decent guy in the end.
Okay, well, I'm off this way. Jack was waiting for us at the corner of Country Club and Iron Mountain. He knew that was where Nicole and I normally left him to walk home up the hill. I'll, speak to you later, yeah?
Sure, I said coolly. Looking forward to it, I added, not so coolly. The rest of the walk home was pleasant, as was the weather, as it promised to be. Nick turned off just a few blocks before me, and I pretty much skipped the rest of the way home. All in all, a good day to kickstart our final year of high school.
The house was empty when I got home. Mum and Dad were still at work, but Jess was more than happy to see me. I bounded up the stairs, apple in hand, and threw my bag on the bed, already squirming out of my bra with my tank top still on. I hated the damn thing. I went to my laptop to log online, as promised. Yep, life is pretty perfect right now. I glanced at the clock, the little digital weatherman, grinning smugly at me. Alright, smartass. So what's the forecast for the rest of the year then, huh?
Perfect, 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 he bleeped. What a lie that would turn out to be. Every night for the next week or so, I have the same recurring dream as the night before term started. It always began with the same dark sky and the horrible flaming visions, except this time it was always followed by another dream, which made no sense at all. It wasn't as fantastical as the first, but I could tell it was a continuation of it. The bright shining lights were gone and only the same dark tranquility remained.
Two voices, belonged to a couple, I presumed, were bantering about something I remember thinking, in my semi-conscious state, that perhaps it was Mum and Dad, but the voices were far too young. I even wondered whether I was remembering a little pickle I'd had with Jack. But it was a conversation we'd never had before. I was quite sure of that. We were barely even going out. This conversation was more than flirtatious banter. It had an edge to it that always left me slightly uncomfortable when I'd wake up in the next morning.
You could have made it a little easier, you know.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You didn't have to speed off like that.
As if I had a choice.
Okay, so she obviously drove off without him. Yes, definitely not an argument I'd had with Jack. I didn't even know how to drive. Ludicrous, I know. But my dad didn't think it was necessary. I wouldn't be driving in London anyway.
True.
He sounded thoughtful, as if he were trying to come up with something else to wind her up with, just for fun. He seemed to be enjoying this, as if they'd been doing it for years and years.
Well then, you could have held on tighter.
Why don't you try holding on tighter?
When everything is getting sucked out from under your feet, or the equivalent thereof.
You know what I mean.
Or maybe she was on a flying carpet or something. Who knew? It was a dream after all.
I'm just saying, why do I always have to do all the chasing?
Because it's usually always me that falls. Keep reading.